Before we get started, I'd like to make some preliminary comments about honesty and integrity. And I'm talking about mental honesty, honesty with ourselves, not so much honesty with other people. While that is important, the most first thing is to thine own self be true. You know, oftentimes when things are unpleasant, we have a desire to shut them off and not wanting to believe them. Man does not want to believe unpleasant things. People do not like the bearer of bad news, for example. I'm going to say unpleasant things today. I hope to insult everybody before the end of the day. If I don't insult you, feel insulted. I've missed you. But I'll try to get to you, and if you aren't insulted, maybe you're just not listening too closely. The thing is this, oftentimes people will say, somebody will be talking about something, and he'll give a whole series of points, and you disagree with one point, and therefore you say, I disagree with everything you say. Well, you may do that, but what you're doing is intellectually dishonest. If you disagree with one point, disagree with one point. But this is no reason to go and throw out a conclusion in which the other points support and you know are true. Now, in order to save a lot of our own mental problems during the day, I'm going to ask you to do something which I consider quite honest. Anything I say today that you disagree with, I agree with you. I concede. I'm wrong, you're right, all right? And we'll just throw it out. Just say, I never said it. Take only those things that you do agree with what I'm saying, and say with those things, and forgetting everything I disagree with, can I still say that his conclusion's wrong? I am going to say that I will let the conclusion I give stand on those things we mutually agree with. And if you want to disagree with anything, I concede it. No argument. You're right, I'm wrong. I still say that my conclusion will stand even with everything you can throw out, unless you're going to be quite dishonest with yourself. Now, I'm hoping to be able to do that. And I make that comment ahead of time. The second comment I'd like to make is this. A lot of people think I'm trying to educate people. I'm not. What I'm trying to do is show you a course of thinking. I'm only given a skeleton. If you like the skeleton, you're going to have to put your own meat on the bones. You've got to fill it out. That's what the books are for, to give more information. I'm not trying to give a thorough education. What my purpose here today is to give a wide spectrum across the area of knowledge of man and try to interrelate it into a consistent pattern, a pattern not presented elsewhere. In order to start that pattern, I'd like to make this first comment, and I want you to think back to this comment as the day goes on at different times that you get a little perplexed. Over in China, the other day, I was watching the ping-pong diplomacy we got going today. You know, Red China's becoming our great friend, and they're going to push us in the United Nations and everything. You can see the propaganda program, right? 6 months ago, the great and hated, now they're wonderful, sweet, and light people. The TV is a tremendous thing. It can make us think anything we want to think and turn us on and off a whole nation. It's amazing how beautiful control they have, thought control, operating through the TV. But over in China, they were showing this picture in Peking of the kiddies going off to school. You saw those little kiddies? Maybe you didn't see that thing on television. But they've got their little red book, and they're marching along with their little red book, the sayings of Mao, and they're marching to school with their little red book and their white suits, their little white shirts and so forth, and the sweet little kids all marching like soldiers with their little red book of the sayings of Chairman Mao, held to their heart. All right, that was a sweet, touching picture. Let's take a look at something at the primer that the Chinese use. This is the Communist Chinese, the 6th grade or 6-year-old primer. That'd be about 1st grade here in this country. It starts out with this paragraph, page 1. Where does your food come from? Does it come from God? No, it comes from Chairman Mao. Where do your clothes come from? Do they come from God? No, Chairman Mao. Where does your housing come from? God? No, Chairman Mao. All good things come from Chairman Mao. Now, I'll ask you a question. Who's God? Well, it's quite obvious. God is Chairman Mao, isn't it? Now, notice something. What is God? God is whatever you depend upon. God is whatever you depend upon. Now, people say, I have no God. No, they're a liar. They've just made themselves God. They're their own God. But a God they have. You can't get away from having a God. God is whatever is going to direct your life. Now let's ask ourselves this question. In our schools, our children are taught, for example, who's going to take care of them when they're old? Is it going to be God in heaven? No, it's Social Security. Who's going to take care of them when they're sick? Are they going to trust a God in heaven? Oh no, we're going to trust Medicare. What are we going to trust when we have mental illness? A mental health bill. What are we going to do to solve our racial problems? A state edict. What are we going to do to solve our social problems? We're going to have everybody regulated and thinking is the way the state wants to think, isn't it? Where do we look to solve our personal problems, mental problems, health problems, financial problems, monetary problems, employment problems, income problems? Why, we look to God. And that God is in Washington, isn't it? There are a lot of people who call themselves Christian, which I say are phony as a $3 bill. Why? They're looking to Washington to solve their problems. They're trusting Washington in legislation. They're not trusting the Lord. Therefore, I know who their God is. There's a lot of preachers who are standing up in the pulpits talking about that they're Christians, but what they're talking about is Washington should do this, that, and the other thing. I know where their God is. They can kid me all they want, but I'm not going to believe it. I'll tell you where your God is. Your God is wherever you're looking to solve your problems. Now, where do we learn to worship Washington? Where do we learn to worship the state? By the way, state worship has a name. You know what the name for state worship is? Fascism. You want to know what fascism is? It's state worship, looking to government to solve your problems. How do you like that? Now, anybody who looks to government to solve the problems is a fascist. They come all kinds of fascists. Some call themselves Christians, some call themselves conservatives, some call themselves liberals, some call themselves communists, some call themselves socialists, but they're fascists. That is, they think the state is going to solve all their problems. But let's go back and take a look at something. Where did we learn to worship the state? At the state church. That's where you learn to worship God, isn't it? At church. We go to the state's church, which is called sometimes schools. That's the label they don't put up there. They don't really say what it is. And what do we learn? We learn to look to the state for all good things. Just like in China, they look to Chairman Mao for all good things. We look to a Washington Bureau, to health, education, to welfare, Department of Labor, Department of Commerce, to solve all of our problems, don't we? One of my point is this. These schools are not schools, they are churches, and they're teaching a gospel. Their gospel is simple, that man can solve his own problems by his own economic and social schemes. Now that's a simple gospel, isn't it? And those teachers are priests and priestesses teaching that gospel. And those textbooks are Bibles teaching that gospel. Now let me prove this to you. What is a computer? Or I could even go back one more step if we want to. A while back, somebody was asking a man who was making robots, how long would it be before you could make what we would consider an acceptable robot? And he said, well, what is an acceptable robot? An acceptable robot would be one that could operate on its own, that you wouldn't have to personally be there and direct it. Otherwise, it's not a good robot. If you've got to sit there and manipulate everything it's doing, you might as well do it yourself, right? A good robot's one you can turn on and do what you want to do without you having to be there. The second thing is that this robot, in order to be able to do things on its own, has got to be able to have receptors of its environment. That is, it has to have some way to know what's about it. The third thing it would have to have is a pretty fantastic computer. Fourth, it has to have a lot of power. It's got to be manipulable, and it should be long-lasting, and it should be cheap operating, shouldn't it? He says, look, we already got one. We've got a robot today which has over 10 billion cells in its computer bank. 10 billion transistors. That computer, if we made the most miniature computer with 10 billion transistors with today's technology, would take 2 million cubic feet to house the transistors and 1 million cubic feet to house the wiring to hook them together. Plus, it would take the power of the Hoover Dam to run it and the water of Niagara Falls to cool it. It's a pretty fantastic computer. By the way, each one of us have one of those on top of our shoulders. We may ask ourselves what we're doing with it. It may be very idle. He said, receptor mechanisms, just think of the fact that you can sit here and with light waves impinging upon a small little part of a little bit of flesh here, it is able to break it down optically, put it onto a retina, which is light sensitive, which by a chemical reaction excites electrical outputs by a way we do not know, sends those electrical outputs to a circuit in the brain, which there's no picture yet, by the way. The brain and the back of the optical nerves descramble the code and make an optical picture in where we don't know and how we don't know. Not only that, we can record that optical picture and we break it down. And you take a look right now how fine everything is. You only have a finite number of rods and cones, yet that picture is put together with almost complete dexterity. He said, give us 2 billion years or 3 billion years, and man could not approximately even equal the human eyeball, let alone the pickup mechanism necessary to take it and transfer it to a computer and decipher it and know through this memory bank what it's seeing. So he's got to compare it with everything else and know what it is. There's one thing to see something, there's another thing to know what you're seeing. Quite a problem. We have these nice robots, they run 70 years. They'll operate on 2 handfuls of gruel a day. They'll climb mountains, they'll swim oceans, they'll do all sorts of things. Not only that, they are very easy to program. They're the easiest thing to make a robot out of, and they're quite reliable. We've got some 4 billion of them walking around already. He says, in trillions of years, how could man ever hope to make a robot like he already is? They're cheap. You get them for a few bucks. We make them every day. Now, I make a computer. IBM, National Cash, or so forth, builds this big computer, Bendix or Burroughs, and we got this big machine. What can this machine do? It can't do anything. I'd like that. Why? It's nothing but a machine. Transistors, wires, tin can, and a few magnetic spools, or disk, or some other sort of memory device. But the machine needs 2 things to work. What are they? First, it needs data. It needs lots of data. We got to feed data in there, information, right? Second, we got to instruct it what to do with the data. We call that programming. All right? Now, we have to do 2 things. We have to feed data into the machine, and second, we have to program it. What do we mean by program it? We got to tell it everything to do. See, the machine is extremely stupid. It only knows 7 things. Read, write, add, subtract, store, recall, and stop. And you got to tell it when to do each one of those things. Otherwise, it won't work. And you got to tell it where to store and where to recall it from. Every single digit. Now, not only that, the machine is so stupid it can't count higher than 1. It only knows 0 and 1. It's as big as it can count. It's a binary system. So it's not a very bright machine. Why have such a stupid machine? It has one advantage. It'll operate at around 200,000 digits a second. It'll store, recall, add, and subtract, and stop on. See? And at 200,000 digits a second, it has one advantage. It's called speed. Nothing else that the computer has. It has one other advantage, accuracy. That is, it doesn't forget very well. Now notice, if we're going to have this computer do what we want, I'm the programmer, right? I want to make sure of one thing, that it only gets the kind of data I want in the machine. Otherwise, I can't be sure of what kind of conclusion it's going to come to, right? If it would get its own data and put its own data independently in that machine, data I didn't control, the computer would come up with the wrong answers, wouldn't it? What do we mean by wrong answer? An answer I didn't want. Let's get clear what a wrong answer is. It's an answer I don't want. To make sure it comes up with the answers I do want, I make sure what kind of information goes in there, and I make sure other kinds of information don't get in there. I want you to remember that, because that's key in making you a robot. Now, the next thing I got to do is program it. I've got to program it, instruct it what to do in all things. How do you do that? We send it to a program school. That is, we train it on what things to react in what ways. Pavlov called this conditioned response. In the computer business, we call it programming. But this is what it is. We program the brain. For an example, if we give only a certain kind of data to kiddies in school, and if we program their brains all to react in the same way to certain data, then we can put up a single stimulus and thousands of kids that come off of thousands of schools on the same day marching for the same thing. That is, if they're robots. If, however, they collected information on their own, they'd have all different kinds of information, wouldn't they? They would have different kids, would have different information. If schools were independent, different teachers would really be teaching different things. And the same stimulus wouldn't get them all thinking and doing the same thing on the same day. If we want all kids marching for ecology, or marching for peace, or marching for something in the same day, all across all schools thinking the same way, what do you have to do? You have to centralize the program centers to make sure they're interlocked, that they're all receiving the same data. That's called textbooks. That the teachers are all been certified programmers. That is, that they know the proper indoctrination methods. And then we will get the kids marching in the proper way. Now let's see exactly what our education system is programming. By the way, in case I forget to mention it, in American Opinion this month, and in my opinion, the finest magazine in the world is American Opinion. There's nothing to equal this. The lead article on education you should read. That is a gasser. If you want to get shook, you just read that. And if you don't want to get shook, stay away from it. That magazine will shake you. You see, there's a problem with this magazine. You don't see this in the public schools for a reason. This is the other data. They don't want you to get in there because the computer won't work right. You get this data in there, and your computer might start thinking on its own and come up with answers that the programmers don't want you coming up with. Now, one of the things you do is you tell the robots that they are really getting both sides when what you're giving is two sides of the same side, and the other side you ignore. For an example, I've watched debates between Wayne State University and Harvard on whether we should get out of the United Nations. One position was Harvard's, the United Nations was perfect. The other was the United Nations was almost perfect, but it had a few flaws that had to be improved. Now, that's a debate. No, that's called indoctrination. You say, let's get the difference here. Okay, let's now take a little look and see what's happening in our schools today. One of the things to have all of our kids to be proper robots is we want them all thinking the same thing so they react in the same way. We are told that the purpose of education, and the teachers are taught this in the schools of education, and those of you going to school, you might find out what your teachers are taught, because this is very interesting. And you can find this in the text of education put out by Columbia and the Dewey boys, which were, of course, Marxist and communist. Dewey went over and built the communist school system in 1920 for 2 years in Russia, for example, after Lenin took over. And these people told you what they were doing. They were trying to take away individualism and bring about a concept of collectivism. Let's show you what this means. You see, the new idea is that we are to bring peace to this world. Now, let's decide what peace is, and we'll define peace. Peace, and this is their definition, not mine, is the absence of conflict. Yes? Little? Okay. No, it's a little bit it's a fact that I have a little problem with the microphone. Okay, let's see if that helps a little. Where was I? Yes, peace. Peace is the absence of conflict. Now, what do we mean by peace? Is peace between nations? No. Peace is between people, isn't it? In order to have true peace, we must have peace between all people. What causes conflict between people? If we're going to have peace, we must remove conflict, right? Logically. What causes conflict? Differences. Just differences, period. Any difference causes conflict. How do we do away with conflict, make people peaceful? Have no differences. How do you have no differences? Have them all think the same thing. Now, what they think is not really so important as the fact that they all think the same thing. Then we won't have conflict. Isn't that logical? Okay, now, how can we all believe the same thing on things? For example, one of the problems you have as a teacher is that parents believe different things. You are instructed in your education courses to alienate the mind of the child from the parent. And the way this is done is you show them all sorts of horrible pictures of things that are going on. You know, bombed, burned babies and atomic bombed kids at Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and cockroaches and policemen kicking Negroes, all these pictures. Then you tell the kiddies this. What created all these things? Why, the beliefs of your parents. Well, they didn't mean to do this, but their religious beliefs, their economic beliefs, their political beliefs, their social beliefs created all of these problems. Now, if we're going to solve these problems, there's only one way to solve them. We must have a new generation which all have the same belief. How do we do this? Simple, children. Love your parents. They love you. But don't listen to them. Don't listen to anybody over 30. And teach the parents at the PTA meeting, tell them that when they have a problem, come ask their teacher. Change the textbook so the history is a whole new fable. So that the parents read the history book and they say they don't even know what, I never heard of this. Oh, what happened to, these people? They disappeared. And the kid says, well, Papa, you're just a dummy. You don't even know what's been going on. You change the mathematics. So Papa opens up the math book and he says, oh, boy, my old man, is he dumb. He's not with it, see? You change everything. Why? So Papa can't talk to kiddies anymore. So the parents are no longer parents. The teacher is the parent. For what is the teacher's job? As a professional teacher, that's me, it is my duty and responsibility to mold the minds of the young to create a brave new world, to create a world without conflict, to create a world of peace and harmony. Isn't that our job as teachers? What does it mean? It's my job to computerize these kiddies, right? And get them to respond right. Now watch how the game goes. How do we have equality, for an example, spiritually? All believe in nothing. You see, if any of us believe in anything, we're going to differ, aren't we? The only place we can come to equality spiritually is atheism. There is no other place of equality. What about morally? How are we going to come to equality morally? Deny that there are morals. Therefore, nothing can be immoral if there are no morals, right? Then nobody can be any more moral than the other. It's called situation ethics, right? And so, we'll do away with immorality by doing away with morality. If we make all things moral, then nobody can be immoral. Then nobody can be more moral than another, then there cannot be conflict over morals, can there? How are we going to make people equally smart? Oh, by making people equally dumb. Do you ever think of that? To be equally smart is to be equally dumb. In other words, we'll have a school system with no competition, take away the gradings, take away any drive for excellence, and we'll talk about people who are too smart as kind of being oddballs and so forth, and we'll de-emphasize this sort of thing and say what is important in education is teaching them to get along in their peer group, right? So what we'll do, let's put another thing. Years ago, people used to practice 20 years at the piano, hours and hours, 10 and 12 hours a day. A man to become excellent, to be on a stage and be a great musician. Today, we have music. I can take 5 boys who never saw an instrument before in their life. We'll go in the back room and I'll say, here's chord 1. Got that? Yeah. When I put my finger up 1, you go there and hammer away all you can on the other end. Got it? We'll plug you in and make it loud. Don't worry about how loud it is. We can turn up the dial. Now, this is number 2, number 3, number 4. Got it? Yes. We're a rock band. Oh, make sure your hair's long enough and hang in the microphone. And by the way, no singing talent allowed. Just bellow it. In fact, if your voice isn't too good, it'll come out better. Particularly if you can't hold a tune. Why? So everybody can be a musician. So there is no real accomplishment. What about art? Oh, we do away with all this realism that things look like something because it would take talent to make things look like something. So we'll have new art, which is things that look like nothing. Why? A 5-year-old can do exactly as well as a person who's had 20 years of this stuff, right? You can't tell one from the other. We can all be artists. There won't be any person who's got more talent than another. How are we going to be equally productive? The only way to be equally productive is nobody produce more than the one who can produce the least. Because if you produce more than the one who can produce the least, he can't catch up with you. No way. The only way for you to be equal is for you to go down to his level. You see, the only way to get equality is to go to the lowest level, not the average, to the lowest level. We take a look at our schools today. We're training kids in sex. Now, they say we're training them in sex and so that they won't have sex and they'll know about it and they won't get into things without knowing about it. Look, you don't get into anything without knowing about it. You know, I teach a man medicine, I expect him to practice medicine. If I teach him law, I expect him to be a lawyer. If I teach a person sex, I expect him to do it. You don't teach people things not to do it, you teach them so they can do it. Then we turn around and say our VD rate is rising, our illegitimacy is rising, we're running free abortion centers, we're running around in these circuses today that are, these kids are around looking at a new religion called sex, and it's a very bad payoff. And they're frustrated because there's no real reward in it. There's no satisfaction in this stuff. It's all glitter, but it isn't true. It doesn't satisfy. And what happens? These kids are frustrated. They're told they cannot excel. They're told if you excel, there's something wrong. Here's a man up in Canada who won first prize in the Canadian National Art Exhibition. You know what his painting was? He was a house painter. He ripped up his bench, took it down, and nailed it on the wall at the art exhibit and won first prize. The spillings of his paint cans. You see, any idiot can achieve that, right? You know what's wrong with our kids today? I want to tell you. They're frustrated. They're given no challenge. There's no challenge to be moral. There's no challenge to excel. There's no challenge to study. There's no challenge to be decent. There's no challenge to achieve talent. They have no challenge. So what do? They get frustrated and they start looking somewhere for something, some meaning in life, don't they? And pretty soon they're doing this. 4 times as many college students blow their brains out as in the general population commit suicide. Why? You're going to school and you're supposed to be educated. You get to this school and you don't learn anything. And you come out of this thing and you know you're a dummy. It's a very frustrating thing to have spent 4 years and all you've been out is a rock festival. Take a look at this thing at the OSU yesterday. Abomination called education. I mean, it doesn't take to be too bright, and I'm going to have to find a better channel here very quickly, and we're going to have all sorts of squeals and squawks. There we go. This is what our schools are turning out. We've been pouring 40,000 millions a year in education to turn out a product supposedly that was going to do away with poverty. In fact, if you go back 50 years ago, the leading educators, the ones who designed our education system, says universal public education will relieve poverty, relieve unemployment, relieve the necessity for all of the welfare, poorhouses, and everything else. Because if everybody's educated, everybody's going to be productive, and we're going to have a world that's going to be moral, patriotic, law-abiding citizens who are going to be productive, and we're not going to have the unproductive people. Well, we've had this education now, government education, for about 100 years, so let's take a look at the product. Are we solving the problems, or are they getting worse? They said crime would disappear. You see, when everybody was educated, they wouldn't steal. I want to tell you something. A man who doesn't learn to read and write can never forge checks. You have to be able to read and write to do that. Boy, I've got troubles now. Something is swinging around here. That's trouble with FM. You never know what it's going to do. All right. I'm going to try to prove my point by another method, because one of the worst things, if possible, is the American people have made God out of education. School, regardless of what it teaches, is good. Regardless. For an example, and I don't know if I got that pamphlet on me. I put it in my pocket last night, and now it's on the dashboard of the airplane. Here's a statement, and I'll quote it as best I can remember it, of the man, I forget his name. That's the problem. I wanted the pamphlet here. The man who was just elected president of the American Association of Higher Education. Now, he is taking his office, and this is his statement, part of his statement. He said, "It is not the concern of the educator whether the student burns their draft cards, marches against Vietnam, drinks all day, drinks all night, uses pot or LSD, or lives, cohabitates, has illicit sex. This is not the problem of the educator. It is to hone the intellect regardless of whether it be used for good or evil." That's a goal of education. Look, I can get that without going to school. What are we turning out? An educated beast? No, they're not educated. I want to tell you something today. I teach in college. These kids are coming to college. They cannot read anything unless we write our college textbooks in the simplest language with simple little illustrations to appeal to simple little minds because they've been given 5th grade level education in high school. And we can't give a college text. I'm switching next year to von Mises' Human Action in my economics course. My problem is I know that 50% of the students can't read von Mises' book. He uses words beyond 2 and even sometimes 3 syllables. And we're going to have to send the kids to remedial English and remedial reading courses in order to be able to read a textbook written by a person who knows the English language. We have now educators like Hiawatha, or whatever his name, Hayakawa, out there in San Francisco State, make this statement. Listen, we must change the conjugation of the verb to be to I is, he is, they is, we is. Why? He said, think of the millions of hours of teaching it will save if we simplify the language, and second, it will not embarrass the ignorant. Now, wasn't the purpose of the school to educate the ignorant? Oh, no. Now it's not to educate him. It is so that he can go to school and find out he is already educated. That is, I is, he is, they is, we is all right. To find out you're educated to begin with. Wow. Here's an English teacher who says we must change it. Here's a Negro student, in this case, happened to hand in a paper. The paper was all right, except it was written in the vernacular of the street. And she said, we have to accept any language as being equally acceptable. After all, it has more expression, it's more colorful, and therefore we cannot mark down for the traditional grammatical errors. In other words, all papers are acceptable from all people, no matter what they are. They can't beat that for a system, can you? Ask me a question. What's this English teacher teaching? Oh, nothing. Whatever you're already saying for English, that's good. In other words, all of our English is perfect. However you use it, that's fine. That's acceptable. That's not education. Well, anyway, let me give you, and we're going to get down to something even a little more mundane. One of the keys of the whole educational system is a thing called evolution. And I want to talk about this for a few minutes from a secular point of view. I'm not talking about from any theological point of view. Let's take a look at evolution and what is taught in our schools. First thing about evolution is they don't teach evolution in our schools. I'm going to tell you that. They don't. They start out in like the 1971 edition of a science text that I was looking at the other day. This is a high school science text. It said this. This is the opening paragraph. Now that evolution has been proved as conclusively as the world is round, now since they've done that, they proceed. That's the end of it. There's no proofs given, no facts given, nothing given whatsoever. In fact, the interesting thing about the theory of evolution is there isn't a theory of evolution. There is no conceivable theory of evolution that any scientist will support. Why? Every theory of evolution has been totally disproved. What is their new game? Seeing they have no way for evolution to possibly happen. Well, I'll get to that after a minute until I prove that last statement I made. Better do that. I see some people here who don't agree with me, which is fine and dandy. Let's take a look. One, let's look at the evidences we have of evolution. Supposedly, our scientific evidence. One is fossils, a fossil record. We have in the world unlimited trillions of fossils. Oh, by the way, I'm always disjointed, so don't worry about that. We jump all over the place. I wanted to tell the girls what $1 billion was. Remember I said $4 billion we spent on education? I want to tell you what $1 little billion is just for the girls. If you had $1 billion the day Christ was born and didn't put it out at any interest, but just went out to spend $1,000 a day, and you spend $1,000 a day for every day since Christ was born, you've got 800 more years of spending to go before you run out of your first $1 billion. So when we're talking about billions of dollars, we're not talking about a little itty-bitty drop in a bucket, see? Just one little billions. And our government can float away $5 billion here, $3 billion there, $10 billion there, and just a number, right? Women, can women like this, see? They imagine spending $1,000 a day. Their minds are all thinking of clicking all the things. Gals, see, fellas, money doesn't mean much to us, but it does to the gals. If you had $1 billion and put it out at 6% interest, just about 6% bonds, you can spend $17,000 every day and be getting richer. Just one little billion. Just a single itty-bitty billion. We can look at some real absurdities. We give an excess, or have been, in excess of $12 billion in goods, trade guaranteed and paid for by our government, to the International Monetary Fund and through the World Bank, by direct financial gifts in all sorts of loans and foreign aid. We give more to the communist nations every year than they spend on the war in Vietnam, ever since we've been there, which is interesting. We don't block the Haiphong River. See, Standard Oil has a refinery in Hanoi. How are they going to get their ships in and out to refine their oil in Hanoi unless if we would block the Haiphong River, where 85% of the materials go up to kill Americans in South Vietnam? Well, we couldn't do that. We never bombed Hanoi during the Second World War, and the Japanese held it to Standard Oil refineries. We never bombed the Standard Oil refineries or Singapore. Why? Standard Oil refineries are Singapore. Remember in the Second World War, a major Japanese naval base? We never bombed one little bomb on that naval base. Why? Well, it could be accidental, or it could be on purpose. In fact, if we look back, we'll find some very interesting things on purpose. By the way, the major financiers of the modern education, John Dewey, the Columbia School of Education, of Modern Education, has been the Rockefeller Foundation and the Carnegie Foundation, financed by the very wealthy. We also notice, for example, in 1967, we had the wave of race riots across this country. Ford Motor, that is Ford Foundation, gave a cash grant to every single organization ever implicated in the riots. Third, every riot leader in this country is on government money. Stokely Carmichael, H. Rap Brown, you name them, all of them, either on poverty funds, the OEO, Head Start money. They're operating out of a government research grant. They're operating off of college funds, which are from government money, or they are a direct government employee. We have not seen, for example, Jerry Rubin up here at Kent State University, talking about we must first kill the first of our opponents and our oppressors, our parents, and burn our own houses to the ground, that we must, in order to be truly free. Here's this guy, gets a federal tax-free foundation to take and put his money in without paying income taxes, granted by the federal government to him. Here's a man who's he's a convict, who is allowed to travel to Havana, who's allowed to cross state lines, who is out on bail on good conduct, and who sits there and talks about burning this country to the ground, and that's considered good conduct by our government. Now, that tells us one thing. Our government has a reason for all of this. Addition, if in 1943 you would have walked down the street of this town with a Nazi flag, how far would you have gotten? About 2 feet. And you'd have been smashed by 100 people, wouldn't you? Or a Japanese flag. Impossible. But today, people walk around this country with the Viet Cong flag. What does that tell you? They are not our enemies. They are our allies. I want to tell you, any time you fly, another nation's flag is permitted within your nation, they're your ally. No nation has ever permitted an enemy flag to fly in the streets or be carried in their country. Never permitted. The Viet Cong are not the enemy, they're the ally. And I'll prove that to you a little later and show you why. The people, the peaceniks, are working for the government, not against it. They are the government's employees. They were trained in government schools. They're led by government tax-free people, financed by big money. Whenever you find a bunch of Volkswagens with daisies on it and a Mercedes-Benz or a Lincoln Continental, you got yourself a left-wing meeting. There's one guy with a lot of dough who's sitting in the back room calling the signals, and his puppet is up front. He's screaming the oaths while everybody else is dancing up and down on the string. You never found one that didn't have the big money behind it. To have a revolution requires 3 things: money, organization, and leadership. Proletariat don't have money. Proletariat don't have organization, and proletariat don't have leadership. If they had leadership, they wouldn't be proletariat. There's never been a proletarian revolution. They're always in the name of the proletariat. But the proletariat never lead it, finance it, direct it, or control it, or win it. They're called cannon fodder in the old days. Proletarian revolutions are not for the proletariat. The proletariat always are infinitely worse off when the aristocracy wins the victory. If we want to take a look, Karl Marx says that if you were born in a bourgeoisie economic environment, economic determinism says that your mind is formed and cannot be changed. This is economic determinism. That if you are born bourgeoisie, you have a bourgeoisie mentality, and with a bourgeois mentality, you can never understand the proletariat. That's what he says. Karl Marx was a bourgeoisie. So is Frederick Engels. Therefore, the Communist Manifesto, by his own definition, is a bourgeoisie manifesto. I like that. He proved it to me by his own logic. Only very indoctrinated people could not see that this is a manifesto for the establishment of an aristocracy, an elite. And it's financed by a social elite today, an economic elite, the intellectual elite. Are they right-wing? Oh, no. They're left-wing. These people who intend to be rulers, that's what they intend. Who do they intend to rule? The proletariat. They don't intend to rule nothing. A ruler wants something to rule. If you're going to do away with the bourgeoisie and you're going to be a ruler, what are you going to rule? Proletariat. While we're on that, let me draw you a little, we're a little short on chalk. Let me draw you a little picture. You know what this is? Now, that's not the boa serpent that swallowed the ponderous pachyderm. I had a petit prince. This is a hill. In French, a Birch. All right? We're getting somewhere. Up here on top of the hill, a man built a big house called a castle. He was called an aristocrat. All right? Now, down here in the valley were people called farmers who were called serfs. Notice the serf. He could not own private property. He could not own his land or his home. His produce belonged to the master, didn't it? He was taken from according to his ability. He was given to by the master according to his need. The master gave him social security. The master protected him and took care of him from the cradle to the grave. The master was his father. All right? Notice the plantation owner in the South. The serf, the Negro, could not own property, private property. What he produced belonged to the collective, to the massa in the big house. Massa Mao, Master Saline, or whatever massa name was in the big house. He was given to according to his ability, taken from according to his ability, given to according to his need, and got Social Security. He was taken care of from the cradle to the grave by the massa in the big house. I want to define for you a free man. You know what a free man is? A man who can keep what he has earned. I want to define a slave. A man, when he earns something, what he earns can be taken away by somebody else. Whoever can take away your earnings is your master, and you're his slave. A free man can possess his own earnings, keep them, hold them, enjoy them, and dispose of them as he feels like. That's what freedom is. Notice, everything in the Marxism is to do what? Do away with private property. Why? That does away with all liberty. Notice, you'll see the left out with these signs, human rights above property rights. There is no human right without the right of private property. Take away the right of private property and you have an abject slave. Every slave owner and every slave master or would-be slave master wants to do away with private property, the property of his slaves. What do you mean by doing away with private property? Do away with his privateness, not the property. Why? He wants to take it. It's as simple as called stealing. In the old days, in a simpler language. Now we got it all wrapped up in all sorts of nice modern terms. It's called taking away the earnings of another man. So political liberty is, by definition, when a person can possess what he has earned. What is it he's earned? Property. Is it private? That is, can he keep it? Or is it not private? That is, it can be taken away by another. Now, that's simple economics. That's more economics than you'll get at Ohio State in 10 years. I know I had 11 years of economics at Indiana Wayne State University. I have a doctor's degree in it. And I tell you, there's no economics there. I learned more economics in the Blue Book than I ever learned in 11 years in college. But be it as it may be, let's get back to education and see what we're getting. We take a look at these fossils. Of all the billions of fossils we've seen, if evolution is true, we got some problems. One, if evolution is true, why isn't it going on today? The evolutionists would like to say it is going on today. Problem. If it's going on today, we do have one-celled creatures, but we have no two-celled creatures, no four-celled creatures, no eight-celled creatures, no 16-celled creatures. How come? We should have 2, 4, 6, and all of these should be here now if evolution is going on today. Problem 2. If evolution is going on, we should find 1 million missing links between all creatures for every creature we find. What do I mean by that? If we are going to have, as they have in their paleontological trees, rats evolving into bats, for an example, and you take draw a picture of a rat, and then you draw a picture of a bat, you see some similarities. Now, if you draw the intermittent rat bats, you got some problems. A bat rat can't live. Unless it has a fully developed wing, it can't fly. And if it has a partially developed wing, it can't run or eat or kill its prey. Now you got a few problems. How many millions of years bat rats lived without being able to eat? How did a spider live with a half-developed spinneret? It can't eat. If we go through the next little thing, we get a thing called embryology. That is that the embryo goes through the whole evolutionary cycle. We've all heard that, haven't it? How it starts with one cell and goes all through the whole history of our evolution. Every time we have that whole miracle repeated of total evolution. If you'll take a look at the embryo, in most stages it cannot exist. At one time, the human being has his heart out in front of his mouth, bigger than his head. Now, it's kind of hard to think of a creature like that living. Very vulnerable. In addition to that, in embryology, they'll tell you these myths. The embryo has gills. You've heard that myth, haven't you? The human embryo, at one time has gills. At one time, the human embryo has feathers. The human embryo has a tail. Let's look at them. On the side of all embryo, because the brain has to be fed from the heart, there is a fold that comes to hold the veins in an early stage in the embryo. Where that fold is, later, fish, which have a fold there too, have gills. Human beings have ears. Fish never have ears. And human beings never have a gill slit. There has never been a human embryo ever observed with a gill slit. And how anybody can call himself a scientist and talk about gills on a human being is a liar and a fraud. Or he's read somebody else's book who was a liar and a fraud and never investigated it himself. Next, feathers. You see the baby human embryo has a white down on it, like a little chicken has. While later, the chicken's down does not become feathers, I'm going to tell you. The down comes off and feathers grow. Your down, you still have some. Go in the mirror and take a look at it. That little white hair in your ears, that's your chicken feathers. Let's go to the third one. The human being has a tail because the spinal column has to develop faster than the rest of the embryo because the whole nervous system and the skeleton must be built on it. At one time, it's a little oversized, just like the heart is oversized and the lungs are oversized at one time. But the lungs are not a lung passing away. The human embryo never has more than 33 vertebrae. And you have it today, unless you've had an operation. In order to have a tail and a tail disappear, you've got to have vertebrae dropping off. No embryo ever had any vertebrae dropping off. We heard another myth. Watch these myths. We have the vestigial organs. You know, the little red part in our eyes, or the old fish eyes used to go across here, now they're disappearing. At one time, our thyroid gland, our pituitary gland were vestigial organs, organs of a past thing are dropping off. Our appendix, tonsils, you know, the vestigial organ. A vestigial organ is an organ that is not needed and has no purpose. But we now know that the appendix is lymph glands used for cleaning bacteria out of the intestinal tract. The tonsils are lymph glands used for cleaning bacteria out of the throat as the mucus and so forth runs from the nose down into the stomach. We also know that they say this little red part in the center of your eyes is vesicle from the other inner eyelid. Well, take away that little red part and you're going to have a problem on a cold day. The cold air is going around the back of your eyeball and it's going to be very uncomfortable. We now know that the pituitary gland and the thyroid gland are absolutely essential for our entire maintenance of our bodily structure. In fact, they seem to be the trigger and control devices, don't they? Rather than being vestigial. In fact, we don't have a vestigial organ. Nor do we know of any animal with a vestigial organ. People say, well, you can cut the tonsils out. Yes, you can cut off your right arm and live. But your right arm is not a vestigial organ. And neither are your tonsils. Only mythologists would tell you such a thing at myth schools, where you're being indoctrinated. Let's look at the fossils. If evolution has taken place, several things we expect. One, that there would not be definite kinds and families of animals, but we'd have all sorts of spectrum today, wouldn't we? An infinite variety intermingled with each other, that there would be no distinction between one and the other. But it's interesting that all life falls in kinds. Second, that there is no breeding between kinds. Now, I didn't say that one horse can't breed with another horse or one dog with another dog, even though they're not the same breed. But there got to be dogs. A dog cannot breed with a fox. A fox is not a dog. A wolf is. You can breed with a wolf. You're a collie, but the collie cannot breed with a fox. If you do, and we do find cases of being able to cross the kinds, that is, you can cross wheat and oats, or wheat and rye, and get offspring. Only about 1% the offspring you normally get. Second, it never happens in nature. It must be forced by man. You can get between different types of corn in nature, and by man, we can hybrid, but they're corn. They have the same number of chromosomes. Whenever we cross between, like the buffalo and the cow, and getting the cattle, or the donkey and the horse and get a mule, we have a problem. All animal and plant crossed kinds, not cross breeds, cross kinds, the male is always sterile. There's never been an exception in the whole knowledge of man. You can cross oats and rye, but all male seed is sterile. Most female seed is sterile, but not all. You will get a mule that can have a colt, but that mule is all horse. There are two types of genes, or two types of cells you have in your body. Somatic cells, muscle, tissue, blood, so forth, and reproductive cells. The fertile female mule is a horse, reproductive cells, totally. Why? If you cross her with a horse, you get a horse. And if you cross her with a donkey, which you can't cross her with a mule because all male mules are sterile, you cross her with a donkey, you get a mule, which says she's all horse. Her somatic cells are mule, but her reproductive cells are horse. You will never find a donkey mule. That is, reproductive cells of a donkey. It's never been found. Now, without fertile males, you can't have evolution. Third, they show us in mythology books called Life magazine these pictures that they have drawn of skeletons all the way. And they show, see the similarity in the skeleton between the chimpanzee and the man and all the different animals with the backbone, the rib cage, and so forth? Now, if evolution is true, we should expect every sort of type of creature imaginable, an infinite variety with no similarity. Instead, we find definite structural similarity between all animals, which tell us something. It's not accidental, and it couldn't have evolved. It had to be planned. It's obviously worked on a blueprint. That would be the logical conclusion. Fourth, we see so-called missing links of the human being's ancestors. There is no missing link ever been found which we cannot find human beings walking around today with bones exactly like the missing links. We can find perfect Neanderthal skulls, Java man skulls. We can find every single type of bone structure you want to find. One of their latest finds is called the Aborigine down in Australia. That's one of their great missing links. Well, might be, but he's living. And the missing link, he can't prove that it's gone into anything else. In addition, let's take some other things. Well, I don't want to get in that. Let's go into fossils in a few minutes. We should find amongst the fossils 1 million missing links for every single creature we find that are like today's creatures, right? In the contrary, we have never found a fossilized missing link between any creatures, not just man and his ancestors, but between any creature and any other creature. They did find one fish that they thought was a missing link. This grotesque fish fossil was found, and this for almost 50 years was their only proof of evolution. And trouble is, in 1947, in a deep sea cage fishing off of Africa, they pulled up the fish swimming. Their missing link went. We have myths like this, the Java man. A man went to Java to find a missing link. He came back with some bones, locked them in his closet, and drew pictures and put them out as the missing link. His missing link is still in your textbooks in 1971. You will find it, the Java man with the sheep around his shoulders. That's the one with the sheep over the shoulder. That's the Java man. Now, fact. By 1915, they finally looked at the bones. Let's see what this man is built on. This complete man, the whole structure is all built on. A piece of cranium that big. 2 or 3 teeth. The story seems to vary, depending on what you read. And a piece of thigh bone found 60 feet apart, exposed in a gravel bed. Wait a minute. Bones don't last a million years exposed to the air. They become dust in about 100 years and blow away. The dust of your ancestors are blowing in your face. If you go out here and fall down, you don't become a fossil. You get eaten up. And if you don't get it, when a fish dies, it doesn't go down the bottom and get buried to be a fossil. It gets eaten. If it doesn't get eaten, it goes to the top and goes ashore and gets eaten. If it doesn't get eaten pretty soon after that, it's going to blow away. It's going to rot, and there's not going to be anything for a fossil. Fossils are not dead animals. The fossils all are animals with flesh. Their bellies are not up, their back is up. Their fins are extended, and the color of the flesh is still on them. These were buried by the billions and billions alive. They were not dead animals. And any scientist knows that. Yet they give you that idea that fossils came over millions. Next thing. Well, we can go, coal. If a tree falls down out here, does it become coal and get buried by dust over 1 million years and become coal? Oh, no. In a matter of a few years, it blows away. You don't have any coal. Coal is made out of fresh wood, buried and preserved. How long does it take to make coal? Mythology. Anthracite is millions and millions of years old. Bituminous is less old, and peat is very young coal, isn't it? Fact. I take a piece of wood, live wood, put it under pressure right now, you get coal now. You drive a piling into hard ground with a pile driver, and you get coal in the center in the driving. The only thing required to make coal is pressure. You put a mountain on top of a peat bog, you're going to have anthracite. Anthracite's got a mountain on it. Bituminous has got a couple hundred feet of dirt on it, and peat has just got a little bit of dirt on it. The age of it cannot be determined. Carbon-14. Science, right? Thing is, we can show you trees that are only 15 years old and give 9,000 year carbon-14 test. I can show you oil deposits that give under 900 year carbon-14 test. You can go into the same forest and get every carbon-14 test you want. What happens to the mythologists? They go selecting, traipsing through the coal pan, finding a piece of coal that comes up with the carbon-14 they want. Why? They've already believed in evolution. Now they've got to find age. By the way, our world has been aging at the rate of 167 million years every year since the turn of the century. That's the average rate of aging of our Earth by the mythologists. Why? Seeing all scientific evidence indicates no evolution. The only way they can get out of it is by saying we've been around here billions of years. Problem. According to the geologists, the rate of gas seepage through rock is such that if oil is in a pool for more than 20,000 years, no pressure could exist. Hey, now there's a problem. We got oil with pressure. And any geologist worth his salt knows one thing. It couldn't have been there 20,000 years. That's quite young, isn't it? Where have our billions coming from? Coal. How do you get coal in big veins with no dirt between it? Not by trees falling down, 70 feet thick. Can you imagine the vegetation have to be in one place, fall down at one time, and get buried instantly? By the way, it's got to be buried. A live wood has got to be buried. Non-decayed wood in huge quantities. You see, there's no dirt in between at one time. First, how do those huge quantities get collected in one place? They didn't walk there. They could have been floated there and been buried by whatever floated them there because they're covered with silt. Possible, huh? In fact, it's the only logical, plausible answer. See, in every inch of this world shows a flood to the highest top of mountains. And all of our fossils are in sedimentary rock, that is in flood silt, and put in layers with definite line structures. New problem they got. At the bottom of the Grand Canyon, a mile down, they've just discovered pollen seeds exactly like today, according to the mythologists. That was almost 1 billion years before there was any life on the face of this earth. That's shaking. We find up in Idaho human footprints with sandals on it, stepping on a prehistoric animal called a trilobite, which was supposed to become extinct some 150 million years ago. The scientists came up with the conclusion that the obvious human footprint with sandals on it was nothing but a giant trilobite stepping on a small trilobite. By the way, the first scientists at Ohio State did the scientific thing. They refused to look at it. We got other little problems. I give you a rock, and I say, how old is that rock? Can you tell a young rock from an old rock? There's small microorganisms in there. It's an old rock. Here's a rock. It's got complex microorganisms in it. That's a young rock. Now, the complex organisms show that this rock is young. And the simple organisms show that rock is old. Now, see, I proved evolution. See, the old rock's got simple organisms, and the young rock's got complex organisms. By the way, that's the whole geological proof of the age of rocks. They pick up a rock and say, simple organisms, old. Complex organism, young. They go into a graveyard. High forehead, scientifically not valuable. High forehead, scientifically not valuable. High forehead, scientifically not. Low forehead, oh, ancestor, look at that little old brain pan, huh? Science, that operation, right? Isotopes. I had a little trouble with the guy in Ohio State here. Scientist, one of your physicists, telling me about isotopes. Well, I'm no scientist, but I know enough about lying. I've done a little of my own self my lifetime. We got a rock. See, I can prove it without microorganisms. There's uranium and lead in there. See how much lead and how much uranium? Now, uranium changes the lead. We know how much uranium and how much lead is in the rock. We know how fast uranium changes the lead. Therefore, we can tell the age of the rock by the uranium-lead content, right? Fine, except there's some problem. You have to make some assumptions. And what is an assumption? It's a made-up fact. Well, you don't have one. Assumption one. God did not know how to make lead. He could make uranium, but he couldn't make lead. All right? Two, no uranium leached in or out of the rock. See, uranium leaches in and out of rocks. How do you know how much uranium was there in the first place? Not unless you were there, can you scientifically say, right? And he wasn't there. Third, lead also leaches in and out of rocks. How much of that lead came from the uranium in the rock, and how much of the lead came from the outside, or how much of it left to the outside? Fourth, uranium does not change into lead, which is one of the bigger problems. There's 5 intermediate steps, one of which is radon, a gas. Now, that gas stayed around hundreds of millions of years in that rock and changed into lead. Now, you want to believe in mythology. That takes faith. By the way, you cannot prove evolution nor creation scientifically. Why? A scientist can only talk about what he observes. Whenever a scientist makes any statement about something that he cannot observe, he's given you an opinion and a faith, a belief, but not a scientific fact. The scientific fact is how much uranium and how much lead is in the rock. How it got there, when it got there, and what happened in the rock is a religious faith. Whatever you want to believe, you're going to believe by faith. Evolution cannot be proved, nor disproved by science. We can look at the scientific observations and say one faith is more plausible than another. I haven't got enough faith for evolution. I used to, because I didn't know very many of the facts. But as I got more facts, I found the faith was untenable. I just couldn't believe in it. I don't have that much faith. I got other problems. We have 24 million meteorites striking the atmosphere every day. We should have, if the world is 5 billion years old, 50 feet of extraterrestrial dust on top of this earth. It's not here. We have very small traces of it. Another one. The human population in all recorded history, from Babylonian records, from Syrian records, from Egyptian records, from Jewish records in the Bible, from records kept by kingdoms in China, Cathay, and in the Western world, modern records show that the human population has always increased, except at one time recorded in the whole history of all of man's writings do we have any time of a decrease of the human population. And that is the Genesis account of a flood. Now, if you want to throw out the Genesis account of a flood, then we've never had any record of any decrease in the human population. Second, the population seems to double at a consistent rate, even with famines and floods, even with pestilence and wars. Though nations at times have had reducing population, the world has never known it. There's been isolated catastrophes. Therefore, if we take the rate of growth today, and if we take man being around, say, just 50,000 years, which is too short, no evolutionist can possibly evolve us in that time, because you got a problem. If man has been around just 50,000 years, what about all of his ancestors? They should, we got a lot of those too, see? But it's just taken and say there were 2 people 50,000 years ago. At the rate of population growth, the human population today is 13 miles deep over every inch of the Earth's surface. If, however, we would go back to where there were 8 people in the world, we would find it to be about 4,500 years, which is about the time 8 people came off of an ark, which is an interesting thing. The only account we have of such a thing. In addition, there are no people in the world, no Aborigine tribes have ever been discovered that every tribe does not have in its lore a universal worldwide flood. Interesting. Again, these are just facts, but don't prove anything. They're just interesting, you see, for us to try to build our faith on, right? We have a lot of other problems. The amount of coal in this world today should be building up all the time, but it isn't. The amount of coal, we don't have coal being formed today. The amount of coal in the world today is approximately equal to the amount of vegetation on the world at one time. As today, our known coal reserves are about equal to our present total vegetation. Normal vegetation cycle, which is interesting. In addition, we got other problems. Here's a real gasser. They have stratus, there's 5 basic maiden stratas, in which they have, 500 millions, and they add millions and millions of years in depth. For the first 2 stratas, there's been no life since the first 2 stratas, according to the Cambrian stratus, according to the scientists. Yet we have in a place in this earth discovered an interesting thing. Going through some 500 million years is a tree with the top and bottom torn off, petrified, 40 feet upright. Now tell me how a tree stands for 500 million years while it gets buried. It rots in 2 or 3 and falls down, kaboom. Hey, that takes faith. I mean, if you got enough religious faith for that. Yep. Here's a gasser ruler. They say, I'm going to prove evolution. You see, the complex fossils are on the top, and the simple fossils are further down. Problem. For 400 miles in Montana and Nebraska, the fossils are upside down. In the Alps, the fossils are upside down. Watch the scientist, priestess, Swami Mystic go to work. And this is their official answer. The Alps turned upside down. And ended up with the strata perfectly level. Now you figure out by just a statistic random chance of a mountain's turning upside down, the whole Alps, and ending up perfectly 180 degrees, exactly inverted. And talk about, you got problems with the Red Sea opening? Whew. That's the guy. Well, we could go on all day. In fact, I got a book that goes on real well in this. If you like, if you got the guts to read a different view, of course, it'll upset your computer. You get all sorts of different ideas out here. A book on evolution written for the layman, with nice pictures and every other thing. We got not only the total sterility between kinds, the total lack of missing links, the inverted fossils, the fact that we do not see any record or any evolution going on today. Now, I'm going to just conclude this by three things. There are only three theories of evolution. One is a theory by a man named Lamarck. His theory was giraffes got long necks by stretching their necks up in threes. Problem, giraffes live in grassland. They don't live in forest. Second problem, Aborigines in Africa have been stretching their neck for 1,000 years, but their children have the same length necks. Chinese women have been binding their feet, but their kids have the same size feet unless you bind them. We have sloping skulls of Indians who took boards and shaped, because they liked the high forehead, and have shaped skulls by their babies, by boards being strapped on them and kept on them. But kids still have the same shaped head unless you put a board on each generation. Scientists sat for generation after generation chopping off rat tails, and you know what happened? The rats never caught on. 10 generations, 20 generations, 30 generations, the rat kept having to. According to Lamarck's theory, if you have your arm cut off, your children are going to be born without an arm. It's never been observed. By 1850, no one believed in Lamarck. He was thrown out. But there was a new guy who lived down a block from a man named Karl Marx, and Karl Marx dedicated Das Kapital to him, a man who, his first edition sold out the first day. The world is waiting for his book. Why? Because they wanted to believe what he had to say. And by the way, this man did not say that the book was scientific. He said it was nothing but theory, and it was nothing but his own mental speculation. He had no science to prove this. At least he was honest enough for that. The man's name was Charles Darwin. He came out with a book called The Origin of Species. He took a look and he says, all tsetse flies don't look the same. They're evolving. Two tsetse flies get together, and their offspring are not exactly like either one. That's evolution. Well, I'm telling you, that happens every time two human beings get together. They have an offspring. It doesn't look exactly like either one of them. We know now, with the Mendel's genes and genetics, exactly predicting every single trait, don't we? Darwin was totally disproved by the science of genetics. Darwin said the variances in the species prove evolution. No, it proves that there's variances in the species, that all people don't look alike. I know that. Thank the Lord. But you have not proved any evolution by saying some people are tall, some people are short, some people have blonde hair, some people have black hair. No, what you're saying is some people have blonde hair, some people have black hair, some people are tall, some are short, some are Negro, some are Caucasian, some are Mongolian. But you're not saying anything about evolution. They're all of a kind, and the kind can interbreed. And when it does, it comes up by a direct science of genetics, which has been proven over and over again. And Darwin was totally disproved by Mendel. No scientist will stand up and argue Darwinian after 1900. They'll just say Darwin was true, but they'll never argue Darwinian theory. Why? You can tear it apart in 2 minutes. And you know what the scientists say, the evolutionists? They say the subject isn't worth debate. That is, they haven't got any answers. Now, there's a third, and that's De Vicis. De Vicis observed around the turn of the century that he had some red plants that all of a sudden had a white flower. And he said, aha, evolution is spontaneous, a whole new creature. Trouble is, Mendel showed how the white flower got there. And it was a direct part of recessive genes matching up, and when you match the recessive gene once in the species, gets crossed with another one with that same recessive gene, you will get a white flower from what appears two red plants. And he demonstrated over and over again he could do this. And in fact, you could predict the exact number of white flowers you were going to get and the exact number of red flowers you were going to get by having mating two red flowers, which even as far as 50 generations ago had a white flower in each line, even though all of the offspring have been red flowers in between. If those two get together, they're going to have one white flower out of so many red flowers. And he proved scientific the number, and the number always came up. So there went De Vici, there went Lamarck, there went Darwin. What's left? No one has ever come up with another theory of evolution. Why? They haven't got one. Those are the only three plausible ones. And I want to just finish this off with one little fact here, and we can come up with billions of these. A mutation is one chemical change in a single bodily cell. All mutations that we've known, I should put this way, most all, because we can't tell exactly if all, scientifically. But as far as we know, every mutation is a birth defect and creates an inferior creature. Survival of the fittest tends to remove mutations. Therefore, if we are evolving by mutation, logic would say we're evolving back into the amoeba. Second, if we take a horse, we only get one mutation in about a million normal births. If we would take 1 million offspring of the original ancestor of a horse, you've got to wait for 1 million to get the first mutation. Then we got to have 1 million from that one to get the second mutation, because all the offspring of the other 1 million don't count because they didn't have the first mutation, right? By this time, we have 1 million times 1 million and only 2 mutations. Do you know how many cells there are in a horse? By the time you developed a horse, if all mutations were exactly the horse and there was no mistakes, and every mutation led to a horse, you would have to have enough horses been created that writing the number would take a volume 5,000 pages of normal print to print the number. Yet you can print a number in 3 pages, write the number, which represents all the atoms in the entire universe. Now that means we have 3,000 more horses or 2,000 more horses than all the atoms in the universe. If so, this world must be piled high with animal carcasses, reaching to the moon and beyond. In fact, probably beyond the solar system. As you can imagine, that many horses, you got a lot of faith. We have never found a horse skeleton that we don't have horses walking around today with the exact same skeleton. We have little horses. We have dog-sized horses today. We have Shetland ponies. We have every size horse that has ever been found walking around today. You haven't proved any evolution. My point is this, getting done with that. Why do they push evolution then? Simple. It is the theory of chaos. Watch. If evolution is true, progress comes through change. All change is progressive. To be progressive, you assist change. How do you assist change? Do away with the status quo. What is the status quo? Why, the institutions that are. How do you have progress? Destroy the institutions that are, and better institutions will evolve. Progress comes through destruction. Marx. You read Marx. You read every liberal economist, and what do they say? They don't tell you how the socialism and how communism will work. No, they never describe it. Why? Anybody who ever sat down and really thought about how it could possibly work would reject it. No, they talk about the problems of the free enterprise system, of the capitalistic system. They say, see, it's not perfect. Yeah, it's not. Therefore, destroy it. And a better system will evolve. How does it come? Wipe the slate clean. Burn the whole country to the ground. From the French Revolution to Kent State University and Jerry Rubin, the same story. Progress comes through destroying the ideas, destroying the morals, destroying tradition, destroying history. If the religion is not perfect, destroy it. If the social institutions aren't perfect, destroy them. If the political system isn't perfect, destroy it. The answer is simple. Evolution is progressed by destruction, and a true progressive is one who destroys. The Bible calls the leader of this organization the great destroyer, or Satan, who talks about this idea. What? Man can come up with a social and political system that is going to create perfect heaven on earth, and we're going to return to the Garden of Eden, called Utopia, by the efforts of man. God says you'll return to it by grace, by my grace. Satan says, no, you don't need God. I'll show you how to get it on your own, isn't it? That is the religion of Satan. And that is the whole religion of Marx, who is a high priest of a religion of chaos. God's religion is of order. He says, I have definite moral laws. You'll break them, and you're going to have punishment. He says, I have definite religious laws. I have definite political laws. I have economic laws. Those who will not eat shall not work. He has definite laws. He says, I have created a universe of order, that all things are in order. Physical laws, scientific laws, moral laws, theoretical laws. All my laws cannot be broken without punishment. That's the religion of God. Then there's the religion of Satan that says, there is no law. Your law is whatever you want it to be. Each can do his own thing and do whatever he wishes, and there is no punishment. There is no payment to make. Progress comes through destruction. You can come up with a system that's going to create a utopia, a Garden of Eden, and you can return to it. Even though God rejected you from it, you'll get back on your own. Don't listen to God. That's a religion. I was just trying to point here. There are two religions. And if we take a look at man, and what are they taught in school? Man is good. The environment is bad. The society is bad. The pollution, isn't it? I tell these people who believe in pollution and out marching against pollution, I say, you think pollution is terrible? Yes. What causes pollution? Oh, society. No, people do. All pollution is caused by people. Now, why don't you help out by shooting yourself? You see, everybody who shoots herself would help remove pollution. And if we'd all shoot ourselves, there would be no pollution. There's no pollution in nature. Pollution is only by man. Man is the only polluter. You get these people out for birth control and family planning. I say, you really believe in it? Yeah. Well, what causes birth? People. You're one of them. And if you want to reduce the population, I have a simple way. If you're not a hypocrite and a phony, take a pistol and help out. Why do you want to get rid of the unborn baby? What about you? We can get rid of you just as well as them. You want to get rid of somebody else's life. You don't want to get rid of your own. You're a phony and a hypocrite and a total fraud. They don't like that. They got plans for other people, not for themselves. Kind of funny, huh? Well, anyway, that's the way people want to think. I know we got coffee, and I'll get it in a couple of minutes. I just got to finish this little part here. I get all the signals are jumping up and down and doing handstands in the back. Anyway, you see, when we get this religion of chaos, we got a problem. Man is going to have a God. Remember I said? Either God in heaven, and he's going to obey his law. Or he says, I'm going to be my own God. I don't need the state or anything. I'll be my own God. What happens? When man does his own thing, what does he do? Does he do good or evil? Watch what man does when he does his own thing. He starts speaking filthy, dressing filthy. He starts acting filthy. He starts looking filthy. He will start trying every sort of immoral act, but not end with that. Once he's finished all the immoral acts, he will now try for perverted acts. That is unnatural immorality. And when he comes to the end of that, he finds no satisfaction, and he keeps driving for more and more perversion because he's driven to this. By the way, Romans 1 tells him he's driven to it and tells him exactly what he's going to do and where he's going to end up. He's driven to perversions. You go up to Yorkville in Toronto, and the big signboard in the hippie area, and it says, be creative, invent your own perversion. See, this is the whole thing. And what happens? They try more and more perversions, but there's no satisfaction or reward in perversion. All there is more dissatisfaction, and they try more and more, so they keep looking for worse and worse perversions. You know what the ultimate? They'll eventually go to drugs, but the ultimate is cannibalism. That is raising now in California. You watch, you see these people doing their own thing. They go out in the deserts and start wearing Indian garb, becoming their natural self, savages What is a savage? A person who does his own thing. Problem with savages, they can't have society. Why can they not have normal society? I can't live next door to a guy doing his own thing. His thing may be eating me. You see, you cannot have civilization with people doing their own thing. They must have thou shalt nots. Thou shalt not do this. Thou shalt not eat me. Thou shalt not steal from me. Thou shalt not beat me up. Thou shalt not do lots of things. See? Now, if we have no thou shalt nots, people got to run away from each other. This is why in the backward countries of the world, for example, in Africa, the lack of civilization has been because everybody's had to hide behind their own tree. From whom? From everybody. With no common law, you cannot possibly live with other people because they'll do their own thing. You ever teach a child to lie? Did you ever take your 4-year-old and say, son, you don't know how to do something, but adults do this. In order to grow up, you got to learn how to lie. Now, here's how you do it. Oh, no. Kid knows how to lie instinctively. You ever have to teach him to be filthy? Oh, no. Do you ever have to teach him how to be a messy, smelly thing? No, you teach them how to go to the toilet, don't you? You ever have to teach them how to be brutal to their playmates? No, it's natural. Do you ever have to teach them to be selfish? Oh, no. Every kid is naturally selfish. There is not a single sin that a kid doesn't naturally do all by himself with no training. In fact, every virtue you must train. There is not a single virtue that they'll pick up on their own. And any people that do their own thing will end up in every evil known. That's what the Bible said. Moses said on the mountain, at Mount Sinai. That's why God said he gave us a law. The thing that the school system is telling you is something totally phony. Man is by nature good, and society is bad. When a man commits a crime, he didn't commit a crime, society did. He was culturally deprived, economically deprived. He didn't really murder, society did the murdering. So we got to let this innocent little victim murderer go. You see, after all, the person he killed, he is a member of society. He's a guilty one. He made the murderer, didn't he? So, after all, he should be punished, but the innocent, sweet little murderer should be let loose. We must let the thief loose. Why? Isn't it terrible that he had to grow up and be a thief, that society made him a thief, this poor person? We must have compassion on him. God says you do not have capital punishment for murder and your society shall be destroyed. Why? Once you get the idea of not punishing people who do wrong, all you're going to have is people doing wrong because that's a natural thing they're going to do. What happens is we have more lenient laws and we look upon rehabilitation, not punishment, for the courts. We have more and more rape, murder, stealing, violence, every single sort of abomination you can think of rises rapidly. Why? The courts are promoting it. And it's being taught in the schools. Why? They're Satan's schools. One thing, I'm just talking to the Christians here. How can any Christian send his child to a Satan school to learn about a God that is in Washington to provide all their needs? And then turn around and say, I lost my son. No, you didn't. You destroyed your son by your own cheap, wanting to get out of paying for his education, by your own greed, and by your own lack of faith in the Lord. And you're going to answer for that in the second judgment, according to the book I have here. Now, those non-Christians don't have to listen to that, but that's for Christians. How can a Christian turn their children over to a heathen teacher? I don't want prayer in a public school. I'm opposed to it. I'm opposed to public schools. I think prayer in a public school is completely out of place. Totally out of place. The Bible tells for Christians not to have their children or themselves in public schools. No teacher who's a Christian can teach in a public school, in my opinion, as I read the Scriptures. Christians are to raise their children and educate their children in fear and admonition of the Lord, and not in a public school. Well, let's have some coffee, and we'll have another session. Yes. Oh, yes, there will be tapes available of this talk for those who are crazy enough to buy them. They'll be $5 a piece, and they can be orders made at the book table in the rear. Talk a little bit about, yes. Louder?
I think it'll be plenty loud when we get going. Is that loud enough? Can you hear? I realize the microphone is not perfection. The problem is, if you use a standard microphone, I have to speak at a level. See, I'm only whispering. I didn't tell you this. To go 6 hours, you can't do it with a standard microphone. I have to use a noise-canceling microphone at close range. And this is the finest microphone you can buy to do this kind of work, and there's just no possibility to get in a building like this better fidelity than I have without, well, it might be possible if I had my other unit that burned up last week, but there's no possibility with the wattage that I have available. I'm running at full output of this, my standby unit. I don't have a standby anymore. I'm going to have to get one of those, so standby to the standby. Let's take a look at some other things today. I was mentioning earlier that we had a lot of problems going on today, and one of our basic problems is that it appears that supposedly those things which would be our government, for an example, and not just necessarily our government, what I'm going to talk about is any government. Governments themselves have a problem that most people don't know about. The average person does not know the true nature of government today for a simple reason. Governments have been doing their education. When people were doing their own education and private education, they understood what government was about. Today, people do not know what government is about. When we have collectivism, for an example, that it is the duty and responsibility of leaders to run society. That is, a clique, a group, an elite is to plan our lives, to plan our money supply, to plan our employment, to plan our whole thinking. These people become gods, and as gods, they need the power to carry out their wishes. Now, these people may believe that what they're doing is good, but they intend to do it. This is the problem. How do they do it? In order to be able to control the amount of money supply that people have, they have to be able to create artificial money at will. Problem. When men can create artificial money, they can do dishonest things. Problem. All men that can create artificial money do dishonest things. For example, they have created $55 billion worth of money that they said was backed by gold and then slowly stole the gold. And now you got 55,000 millions of dollars printed by a private company called the Federal Reserve, which is a private corporation, privately owned and privately controlled. It is not controlled by the federal government, nor is it owned by the federal government. Not $1 is owned by the federal government. Now, the president does appoint to the Federal Reserve Board one member every 2 years. The board has 19 members, only 7 of which are appointed by the president, and it takes him 14 years. And, of course, the president is only in 4 or 8 years, which means that maximum a president could appoint 4 out of 19. That's not what you call real direct